Yo, what's good? It's your boy Dot from Dot Me Now Coaching and Entertainment for coaching my links are down below. In today's video, we will be talking about creation and control structures and the true source of all control structures. Now, this video might go in a direction which you may not have expected. But best believe I will be spitting some facts based upon various things that I've experienced out of body, different downloads I've received. I've gotten a pretty good understanding in regards to these different control structures which take place in creation. And it's not always what you may think. Now, if that sounds good to you, I would like to ask that you like this video, subscribe if you're new, and if you see the option, maybe you could also hype up this video for your boy. That's the third thing I would like to ask for you to do. Without further ado, let's get into today's video. Alright, so in order to understand the true source of all control structures, we need to first understand some inherent principles of creation, right? Understand that before creation, you kind of just had source, right? At some point, source manifested itself as pure awareness, and from that pure awareness, source became aware that there was no creation, but it also became aware of its infinite potential. Now, once Source released that infinite potential, it led to pretty much infinity. You just had infinite potential manifested. And that is inherently chaotic. And by the way, what I just described to you is pretty much the first planes of existence, like 12 and 11, like how those kind of came into being and stuff like that. If you want to understand more about the planes, I do have a YouTube video about it, but I go super in depth into every single plane in my Patreon, right? Understand that the planes of existence are not the same as the 12 realms of the physical plane. The physical plane has different subplanes. These are what people refer to when they mention the 12 realms. I'm not talking about that because there are many more planes beyond the physical plane. You got to think about, where's the void at, right? Where does source exist at, right? Where does your spirit exist at in all of your spirit's kingdoms, right? These all exist on various different planes. Now, when it comes to the beginning of creation, like I said, at some point you just have infinite potential manifested. That's chaos, right? Because infinite potential being manifested has no structure to it, right? It's just chaotic. Now, over time, different beings formed out of this chaos. These are the primordials that exist on the primordial plane, right? Primordials are literally consciousnesses that formed out of infinite potential. These are consciousnesses that formed out of chaos. And when it comes to your omni soul, right, your omni soul formed out of this chaos until it eventually became an eternal spirit with a soul and this body and stuff like that. The reason I am bringing this up is because when it comes to primordials being aware that they came from infinity are also aware of the chaotic nature of where they originate from. They understand that when it comes to that infinite chaos, there is no solid creation. When primordials first manifest themselves, they kind of explore their own little spark of infinity, but because they split off from that, they can experiment with different creations within inside of their own being. A primordial can literally be its own realm, right? And when I say realm in this sense, I don't mean the subplanes of the physical plane. I would when people say the 12 realms, I would either call those subplanes or demiplanes. And a realm is a certain area inside of a certain plane. Think about it like a galaxy, right? You have this universe. You can see the whole entire universe as the physical plane, and then the galaxies inside of the universe would be like different realms inside of that plane, right? So when I say that primordials can exist as their own realm, it's kind of like they're their own galaxy or their own galactic cluster. They're like multiple galaxies inside of one, kind of. You could kind of see it like that, for lack of better terms. Now, over time, these primordials recognize that although they are a group consciousness, there are several other group consciousnesses that also manifest out of infinity. And different groups of primordials decide to work together to make a template for creation, right? Now, some primordials choose not to partake in that. They kind of just exist inside of their own being. Some of them return back to infinity. Some of them return back to chaos, right? Some of them return back to the void. Before you have infinite potential manifested, you have the void. And the infinite potential manifests through the void. You see? But with all that being said, the primordials that do decide to work together, they form a divine omniversal template, which exists inside of the ninth plane of existence, right? Along with higher God beings, right? Now, I'm saying this because this template is what all creation is based upon. You see? Every single creation in these lower planes are based upon the template. This is where you get certain divine laws, which essentially will always be true, right? The reason that you have certain divine laws is because there's a template which all creations are based upon, right? And this template is technically always expanding because primordials are always forming out of infinity because infinity is fucking infinite, you know? So there's always going to be more added to the template. It's like the template's already done, but it's still being made because all time's happening at once. There's no past, present, future. It's not like it was being made before and then it's made now, then it's going to expand in the future. No, it's all happening right now. It's already perfected and it's also being added to. It's crazy. It's kind of a paradox, but it's only paradoxical to our minds because we live inside of time and space. Now, my point is, due to the fact that every single creation is based upon this structure, every single creation has a certain structure to it. You see? In order to have creation, you need order and structure. Because when it's just infinite potential, there's no structure, there's no order. Things are just chaotic as heck, right? Over time, though, you can begin to structure certain things and make certain templates for creation. And then as you get lower in creation, more structure is added to it. You see? So the lower you get in creation, the more structure you have, which also leads to more limitation. That's why inside the physical plane, we have so much limitation. That is the lowest plane. And to top it off, we live in the lowest level of the physical plane, right? What people call realm one, or the first subplane of the physical plane, or the first demiplane of the physical plane, right? We live inside like not only do we live in the physical plane, nigga, we live in the lowest part of the physical plane, which isn't inherently bad. My point is just the fact that when you get denser and denser, there's more structure, right? There's more limitation because structure limits you. For an example, I work with kids. Now, in order for kids to learn, they kind of have to follow rules. Now, something that I always think about is how whenever I tell a kid what to do, it's kind of weird since I also understand free will in that if a kid doesn't want to listen, they don't really have to listen. Now, they are subject to certain punishments, and if they're aware of that, they can choose if they want to do certain things which lead to that punishment. But my whole entire point of saying this is that in order for a kid to learn, they can't just be goofing off just doing anything. They kind of got to be able to sit still and pay attention. The balance that I found here is making a kid want to follow the directions, right? I try to make kids want to follow the rules so that way I'm not really forcing them. They're just choosing to be good. But the rules that I give a kid limit them, right? They can't just be They gotta sit still. They gotta be limited to what they can do. If there's no limitation, they can do whatever they want. They can freaking run around the classroom. They could freaking throw pencils and pick up the gym balls because I work in a gym class. So like they could pick up the freaking balls and start throwing them at each other. They have so much things that they can do until I give them rules which limit them. You see? So, and by the way, I will get to the more malevolent control structures, but I need you guys to understand where this even comes from. Because when it comes to divine law, the fact that there is a law implies a limitation, right? Yeah. Right now, you can't do certain things because it's against the law. And technically, you kind of can do them if you want to, but that may lead to certain consequences. And oftentimes, those consequences will limit you. For example, you go to jail. Now you're more limited. You see, the fact that you have law, that automatically implies structure, and structure automatically implies limitation. When the divine omniversal template was made, they pretty much put a limit on infinity. Instead of having infinite chaos, they made a certain structure where now some of that infinity is limited to certain aspects. For example, infinity is all the numbers, right? But the template may, I'm just using examples, right? Don't take this fully literally. But let's say you have an infinite number line, right? The template might only contain information from numbers 1 through a million. Now that's still a lot of numbers, right? But it's not anywhere near infinity. You see, so with inside that infinite number line, that template is only limited to certain numbers, right? It's not 900 billion, it's just 1 million, right? It could be 900 billion. No matter what number you could think of, infinity always goes beyond that anyway. So my point is, when you make that template, you put a limit to that infinity. Now, if you go to a higher, because the template is on plane 9. If you pretty much go to like plane 11, that is where you can experience infinity and void. You can experience them as one thing, or you can experience them as simply just the void and simply just infinity, right? But that's why they made a new plane, right? That ninth plane was literally made to put a limit on all of this infinite potential manifesting, right? It gave it a certain sense of control. Now you see where I'm getting at, right? When you make certain structure, when you make certain laws, it automatically leads to control. Now, control isn't inherently bad, right? It's not inherently bad, but it can become bad when you're controlled beyond your free will. Because the thing is, right, I could break the law if I want to, but I simply just don't want to. Like, it's not even just about the consequences. It's kind of just, then again, I don't really know all the laws, but with certain laws that I like, for example, it's illegal to unalive somebody, right? I don't really want to do that anyway. So even though that law can be a sense of control for me, I'm actually happy with that because I don't want to unalive nobody anyway. You feel me? But it gets to a point where people start making a whole bunch of structure, and now you're limited beyond your free will. You see? Now, granted, we still have free will. We still had the free will to come here on this planet, quote unquote, right? If you don't understand what I'm saying, quote unquote, watch my video about the illusion of planets, right? Because it's kind of like a holographic projection. It's like a physical holographic projection, right? My point is, though, right, we choose to enter into the system, but while being in the system, we are subject to the laws of the system. And the people at the top of the system can keep on adding certain rules and laws and structures, which make us so limited and put such a control on us. You see? Now, we could always kind of just leave the system, You don't even gotta die. You could just leave your body. You could even get to a point where you literally merge this body with your, like, you could literally merge your soul and your body and get to the point where you can turn your body into a non-physical body and then turn it back physical. If you didn't know that, you got to study some Taoist immortals, bro. Them niggas go crazy. There's also a book called The Life and Teachings of the Masters from the Far East. It's like 6 books, bro. You feel me? And it pretty much talks about these immortals. You had a group of researchers who might have also been scientists who pretty much went to Asia and found these different immortals. I think they were like Hindu immortals and stuff like that. My point is, you can definitely be inside this system and then leave the system without having to die. Whether you just leave your body or you take this body with you and have the ultimate freedom possible. Now you have a physical body that really cannot be bound. Because when you leave your body, there might still be certain bounds on your physical body. But if you take your body with you, now it's like, nigga, you can't bind shit. Yeah, it could. And I'm not saying that you got to do that. You feel me? That's not inside of everybody's path, right? Now, me, I am working towards things like that. I'm not gonna lie. I do certain practices to do. I'm not gonna lie. My main point though is just the fact that you can leave the system. But while in the system, you are subject to the laws of the system. And the people at the top of the system can decide to add more and more limitation. Now, when it comes to like the evil stuff on earth, you just need to understand that there is certain beings that want to keep creation going, but understand that creation has to be destroyed sometimes. You see, destruction is not evil, but so many people are scared of destruction, right? Like if you watch my video that I put on Patreon about the celestial hierarchy, you'll see that on higher levels, on higher planes, you have various different levels of gods that deal with creating and destroying different things. And a lot of people, right, might feel drawn to the creator beings, but they don't even realize that the creator beings are the ones that lead to control structures, which once again, control structures are not always bad. If you have a kid, right, and you're trying to raise your kid, you need to exert a certain level of control over your kid by giving your kid certain rules, laws, regulations, by giving your kid a certain structure, right? Working with kids, I don't really have a kid of my own, but I work with kids. So I understand that kids got free will, but to help them grow, you kind of got to put some structure on them and you kind of have to control them. And I put quotes because technically kids let themselves be controlled. When you control somebody, they're essentially just letting you control them. They're just doing what you tell them to do. It's not like you're fucking pulling them. It's not like they're a puppet and you're freaking pulling their strings. It's not really like that. You're kind of just telling them to do things and they are agreeing to do it, right? Now, you can use more force and then it makes them want to do it more, like, you know what I'm saying, like with certain laws, right? Certain people would break the law if they weren't going to get punished and have a certain level of force exerted on them. You see? Aside from all that, the point that I'm trying to make though is that there's beings that deal with creation and destruction, and sometimes you need destruction. Because I'm gonna give you a certain order real quick, right? First, you have order, which leads to structure, which can also lead to control and limitation. Then you have destruction, which can lead to freedom, but can also lead to chaos, right? We don't always want full blown chaos. You know, chaos is not inherently evil, but if you were to live in a world that had no laws and all the people were like mad evil, bro, you would have to be worried about freaking fires being started outside your crib, people coming inside your crib taking your food. It'd be so chaotic and we would not be happy with that. But certain forms of destruction do lead to freedom. You see? When you get rid of certain limitations, you become more free. Getting rid of a limitation involves destruction. A lot of people are scared of destruction, but destruction is not inherently bad. Creation is not inherently good. The reason why you have all these control structures is because people want to exist inside creation. And all of the more malevolent ones, They're doing it because they want creation to keep on going, because they realize that they may have nowhere to return to once a certain aspect of creation is over. Here's what I mean, right? Imagine if you're a being that was made inside of a certain creation, and once that creation gets destroyed, you cease to exist. That would freaking suck. Now, granted, when it comes to this earthly construct, right? The beings that exert control over the earth, you could say, they do have souls. But understand that the personality which they're currently aligned with, that's gonna freaking die. And they don't want to die, because if this creation gets destroyed, so do they. And when I say so do they, I don't mean their soul, I mean the personality which they're so attached to and which they identify with. Because once that person returns back to their soul nature, they're going to realize that, oh my God, I was such a bad person. Let's just burn this person off. That doesn't mean that the information which made up that person will cease to exist, but pretty much it's going that personality is going to kind of die with the creation. And the only way to tap back into that information is gonna be like a memory. It's not gonna be like they could like a soul inside of its full soul form is not going to align itself with an evil personality. It could think back to it as a memory, but it doesn't really. Here's a great example, right? In real life, right? You could have had a friendship, right? Now, let's say that the friendship ended. That friendship no longer exists. You can still think about it. You still have the information of it inside your mind. You could look back at those memories, but that situation is dead. It's not existing here anymore. It's been destroyed. The only thing that remains is your memory of it. And it's the same with these evil personalities. Those evil people get destroyed with the construct. And they don't want to die like that. Right? Their soul will still exist, but right now they're not really aware of their full soul nature. They're just very attached to their character. And I think they understand enough to realize that if creation gets destroyed, so does that character. And they're scared of that. Now, once they return back to their true soul nature, they're not going to care. They're going to be like, oh my God, thank God I'm not inside that horrible person anymore. But while being that person, being super attached to it, you want to remain as that. So what do? You do certain things to keep the creation going, even if it goes against the original plan, right? Quote unquote. And I say quote unquote because the original plan, you could see it as the plan was already made, but the plan is also being made every single second of our experience, because once again, this plan exists outside of time and space. You feel me? So it's already been made while at the same time still being made. That's why I put a quote on the original plan, because sometimes plans change, but the plans never changed. That was kind of already the plan from a higher perspective. And we don't got to talk too much about that, because although I can understand that, trying to explain it is very paradoxical, and it might make niggas' minds go like, wait, what the fuck's he talking about? So let's not even get into that. My whole entire point is just the fact that if you have beings that don't want the creation to end, they're going to try to keep it going. And when certain things should be destroyed, they're going to try to prevent that destruction, which can lead to even more control, because destruction can lead to freedom. For example, if you have certain beliefs inside of your mind that limit you, you may act from those beliefs, and the way you express yourself is very limited. But if you get rid of those limiting beliefs, if you destroy them, you become more free to express more parts of yourself. You see? And understand that when it comes to awakening, right? Awakening is actually a destruction process. You see, when you're awakening, you're destroying your old self. You're destroying the old limitations which you had. You're destroying your attachment to your ego and your character. You can still have a character, but now you're not attached to it. You don't think that I'm only this character. You realize that you exist way beyond that. You're destroying things. You're getting rid of old beliefs, old ways of being. You're destroying things. Awakening to your true self is actually a destruction process. And if people don't want you to awaken, right, what do? They create more. They add more structure. They put more limitation on you, which makes it harder to awaken because you might try to destroy certain things and they just put something else on you that you gotta also destroy. And then they put something else on you which you gotta destroy. You see what I'm trying to say? And understand that if everybody awakens, creation begins to end. It's kind of like a dream. When you're inside of a dream, the dream keeps on happening. Once you wake up, the dream ends. If this is a big giant dream, the more and more that people awaken from the dream, the more and more the dream begins to fall apart. And it gets to a certain point where if a lot of people wake up, the dream begins to end more and more. And understand this: the different souls who become attached to their character and their malevolent ways, they become a part of the dream. Because understand that if you were not inside of this physical creation and you were inside your soul form, you wouldn't be evil. That evil character that you have is literally a product of the dream. For example, inside of your dreams, when you do dream at nighttime, you have a certain character that may die once you wake up. I don't know if y'all had these kinds of dreams, or I don't know if you heard about these kinds of dreams, but sometimes you could dream and you look like a whole different person. It's been times where I looked at myself in the mirror in a dream and I was a whole white man. Once I woke up, that white man died. That character died. I still exist. My soul still exists, but that character, he died. That the sense of self that I had, because the thing is, right, although I was in a different character, I still felt like me to some extent. I still had my sense of self. I still had the awareness of who I am, even if I wasn't fully conscious of it. So my sense of self, that remained, right? Which comes from your soul. My soul still remains, right? I can still think about how I felt in that experience, but that character, yeah, he's dead. He died with the dream. Same with evil people. The character which they have is a part of the dream. So if everybody begins to awaken, the dream starts to fall apart along with the character. The character dies with the dream. And because they're just a character inside the dream, they stopped being the consciousness that is creating the dream, right? And here's what I mean. Inside of dreams, right? You can create, like, let me just give an example. Let's say I have a dream, right? And inside that dream, I'm building a freaking house made of popsicle sticks, right? Inside that dream, I'm creating, right? I'm making popsicle sticks. But because I'm attached to the character who's making these popsicle sticks, I actually stopped being the higher dreamer that's controlling the whole entire dream. You see? So the people in this dream, the people in this creation that make control structures, they're not really controlling the dream. They're just inside the dream making new control structures. That's like me being inside of a dream and I'm making popsicle sticks, right? Let's take this even higher. Let's say I have a dream and I'm literally building a prison for different people to go inside of, right? Yeah, I am building certain things and I might be controlling people inside the dream. But once that dream ends, so does the prison. And what does that tell you? These evil people are not controlling the whole entire dream. They're just inside of a certain part of the dream, making new things inside that dream. But once the dream ends, so does everything which they made. So, to answer the question of what is the source of all control structures, It's creation. Creation itself leads to structures which can lead to control and limitation. Once again, limitation is not always bad, right? Doesn't have to be bad, right? Control doesn't have to be bad, right? Doesn't have to be bad, but it can be bad if it's done with ill intent. And that ill intent starts to happen when you're inside this physical plane and you're able to be evil. Because inside of your higher divine form, you're not going to be evil. Like the different creator beings and the different destroyer beings, the creator gods, the destroyer gods, they're not evil. Even the ones that made this creation, right? Because you had different souls that came together to make this creation, but those group of souls could have been part of a whole entire oversoul, right? And that oversoul can have aspects of the creator and destroyer gods. If you see my video on Patreon about the celestial hierarchy, I actually talk about how your oversoul has a mix of these creator and destroyer gods, like celestial gods and titans. Celestial gods create things, titans destroy things. Your oversoul has kind of a mix of both of these, and I kind of explain how that happens. But the reason I put it like this is because what I'm trying to say is, right, the beings that made this construct are not evil. You see? But it's only when you get inside of it where evil begins to manifest. And there's actually, let me not even talk about that. What I was about to say would go beyond the scope of this video. So I'll just shut up about that. But what I wanted to say, right, was simply that or what I want to say is the fact that creation is what leads to control structures. Creation is what breeds all this shit. It wasn't bad at first, but the denser you get, the more limitation you have, and the more corrupt things could get. You see? At that point, you got to destroy certain things. You got to destroy what's binding you, which oftentimes is test your beliefs and your thought processes, right? Once you break free from that shit, you could become free. You can start leaving your body. You can merge your soul with the body. You could do a whole bunch of things, right? You're not as bound as you think that you are, but you need to destroy the thoughts that make you think that you're bound. I'm gonna end this video. Peace out. I love you. Bye.